It's time to get real. Real situations and real solutions. It's time for Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing. Inspiring healthy communication, building strong connections, and helping you grow in love, one conversation at a time. Right here on Pittsburgh's DSEN, each Monday from 8 to 10 p.m. Here's Dr. Linda Bing.
Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome to Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing on Pittsburgh's DSEN. We are here every Monday night from 8 to 10 p.m. to discuss topics that are relevant to relationships. And we talk about all kinds of relationships. So I'm glad you decided to tune in tonight. Join me every Monday night. Whether you're here at the beginning, you come in the middle, you come at the end, it's always good to have you along for the ride. So now tonight's focus, at least for the first hour, we're going to be speaking on the subject of assets brought into the marriage. So, for example, who owns them? You know, if someone has money in the bank or they own a home, a vacation home prior to getting married, we want to talk about whose property is that? Does it naturally belong to both of them because of the marriage? And let's just find out. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then in the second hour, we're going to focus on secrets. Many times there are secrets in a relationship that we didn't intend to be secrets. Like, for example, the whole idea of the money. Maybe it just slipped your mind, okay? But I'm going to focus specifically on if you find out information about your best friend's relationship, do you tell your friend or do you keep it to yourself? So that's what we're talking about tonight. And as always, your voice is encouraged. So call me at 412 213 8995, or you can text me 412 218 3888. And if you're tuning in on YouTube, of course, you can place comments in the chat and I will get to them as well. All right. So we do know that money changes things, right? In all kinds of relationships, you get to a certain level of money and it changes things. People never think that money will change them, but it has a tendency to do that. It's more than just a cliche. And we know that in a relationship, financial trust is a critical pillar of any serious relationship. One of the three top reasons that therapists and psychologists, psychiatrists, one of the top three things that ends relationships is money. And so financial conflict is something that we really need to look at in its entirety. And so building financial trust is essential to avoid stress. For one thing, you have to trust that this person that you decided to do life with, whether you're married or just in a long-term committed relationship, you need to trust that they are handling money appropriately, especially in a marriage, because what they do is going to have implications for you as well. So to keep the stress levels low, we need to make sure that there's sufficient funds, that the funds are being spent in a way that is mutually agreeable. And then also it fosters intimacy. When you have financial trust, you can feel closer to someone. You feel more trusting of that individual. You and your partner can successfully achieve whatever long-term life goals you have. So maybe you have a goal of buying a home one day or a vacation home. Maybe it's sending children to college, building a legacy, or you just desire to retire at a specific age. Whatever the case might be, financial trust is something that's critical to reaching those goals. So I'm gonna give you some of the reasons that the experts tell us that financial trust is so vital. I mentioned reducing stress and preventing resentment. So they tell us that money is one of the most common sources of relationship conflict. Like I said, it's one of the top three. Sex, communication, and money. Those are the the three categories that people usually talk about. And when you have a disagreement over some hidden debt or some secret spending, or maybe it's opposing financial values, it can rapidly erode the trust and create some emotional distance between people. Debt is one of those things that people don't always reveal when you're dating. And so it makes sense if you're not in a serious relationship, you don't feel like you need to tell someone about all of the credit card debt or something that you may have amassed. That's fine. But once you get into marriage, or even if it's a long-term committed relationship, you're living together, you're going to do life together, understanding the other person's debt, not only does it tell you something about how they handle money and give you an idea of what their credit score might be, which could impact future decisions that you make, it's something that could creep into the situation. So, hidden debt or things like child support and alimony. You need to be aware of those things because any money that should be coming into the household, part of it is now going to be diverted to another household. And I'm not commenting on whether or not that should happen. I'm just saying you need to be aware of it because it could lead to some sort of conflict in the relationship. Secret spending. I know of people who would buy items and put them in the trunk of their car, for example, ride around with it for a while so that when they took it out and put it on, and these were women, and the husband said, "Is that new?" These women felt as if they could honestly say, "Oh, no, I've had it for a while," so that he would not pick up on the fact that they were out spending money. Sometimes it's a matter of setting a limit. Like I know in my marriage, my husband and I have established a dollar figure where you can spend up to that amount and you don't have to consult me at all. Feel free, have at it. But if it goes over that figure, it's not like we're asking for permission to spend. We're just letting the other person know and saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about spending X amount of dollars on this particular thing. What do you think? Do you have a problem with that?" Because again, we need to keep one another in the loop and we need to make sure, what if I went out and spent an exorbitant amount and didn't say anything, and he went out and spent an exorbitant amount and didn't say anything? We're both thinking that there's more money in an account than there actually is, and we could get ourselves into trouble. So those kinds of things can create emotional distance and reduce the trust. I mentioned being aligned to long-term goals. The experts say that transparency in your financial situation allows couples to create unified goals, whether it's a saving for a vacation or funding children's education. These shared targets give your planning purpose and direction. And then this is one that I didn't mention early. This one is shifts to a collaborative mindset. And what they mean by that is combining finances can psychologically shift partners from independent and thinking about me, from those me perspectives, to a collaborative we perspective, reinforcing mutual support. So when you are building trust and you're sharing your thoughts and activities around money, it gets you thinking from me to we, which is important because again, in a relationship, if you're only focused on yourself, that's a plan for failure. Now, financial trust doesn't happen overnight. We know that it can take time, especially if one or the other partner has some bad experiences with finances, bad experiences maybe with a former partner and how they handled money. So it's not going to be built overnight. They've got to get over that and build the trust. And it does not require that you and your partner spend identically. You know, we in my household, my husband and I are very different in terms of our spending habits as well as the things that we want to spend money on. But it relies on open communication and accountability. You can nurture financial trust in your relationship if you do things like set up what's called money dates. You know, you schedule regular, relaxed, dedicated check-ins to discuss budget and goals and any upcoming financial milestones. We don't have money dates, but we pay bills together. And we do that like twice a month. So knowing when most things are going to hit, he might say to me, because he is the lead on that, you know, if you leave it up to me, it's not going to happen. We're going to pay late fees because I forget, I don't think about it, whatever. So he might say, "Okay, we need to pay some bills. You want to do that tonight or tomorrow night?" So in effect, we are setting up a date. We're setting aside some time to get together and talk about money, but we don't do it from the standpoint of budget and goals, but that might be something that you choose to do in your relationship. Another thing that helps cultivate financial trust is being totally transparent, sharing a complete picture of your financial habits, your income, your debts, and your overall financial mindset. So I wonder how many couples actually know how much money their partner makes. You know, you might know that in the ballpark of what they make. You might know based on the kind of job they do. You see what kind of money they bring into the household. But do you actually know how much your spouse makes? Do you know how much is taken out of their check for maybe for healthcare benefits or anything else that's automatically deducted? What do you know about debt? Do you know about credit cards that are just in that individual's name and how much they need to spend on debt? And what's the mindset? Some people have a mindset of we save first, pay our bills, and then we can spend whatever is left. Other people, it's the total opposite. Or some people want to have a certain amount in their account at all times. They won't go below that particular number. So you need to understand what's the mindset. Because really, when they talk about money being a major source of conflict in a relationship, that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about the fact that they have two different mindsets when it comes to spending and saving, and their habits are different. And then the last one is taking ownership. If a financial mistake or a poor spending decision happens, you have to own up to it. You have to, admit and understand what you did that you could have done differently. But now, when you do that, your partner should not be blaming. This is not a time for blaming and pointing fingers and making the other person feel bad. They're already feeling bad enough about the mistake. So you want to collaborate, fix it together, talk about what are we going to do to get out of this, as opposed to looking for blame for why we're in it. And a lot of this stuff varies by generation. So I thought this was interesting. I always try to do a little digging in, do a little research. And among US adults, 43% say that that keeping financial secrets from a romantic partner is at least as bad as physical infidelity. That I thought was interesting, that people would think of financial infidelity and some physical sexual infidelity as being equal. And according to the way I'm reading this, something by them saying at least as bad lets me know that some people think it might even be worse. Now, the article talked about 38% who believe that keeping financial secrets is equally as bad, and 5% say it's even worse. So keeping financial secrets is even worse than financial infidelity. And then comparatively, 31% say that keeping financial secrets is not as bad as physical infidelity. And then in this particular survey, 26% of the people did not have an opinion on that subject at all. And then across generations, so millennials, now that would be people who are, there's a little bit of wiggle room in this, but basically people who are from 30 to 45 years of age. If you're between 30 and 45, and like I said, different people judge it differently. So it might be, for some, it might be 31 to 44, but basically in that age range, millennials are most likely to say that their financial infidelity is at least as bad as physical infidelity. And that 47% of millennials, so almost half of millennials, think that financial infidelity is at least as bad as physical infidelity. Those kinds of things are important to know, because one partner might feel like, oh, okay, so I went over our limit and I didn't say anything. That's not so bad. I'll make it up next month. Well, if your partner looks at financial infidelity as being as bad as physical infidelity, now you have a major problem on your hands. When we look at Gen Xers, and those are people who are between the ages of 46 and 61, roughly, 44% of them say that financial infidelity is at least as bad as physical infidelity. 42% of Gen Z, those are people 18 to 29. And then baby boomers, 39%. Those are people that are between the ages of 62 and 80. So I didn't give you this information in chronological order based on the generation. I gave it to you in terms of the highest percentage. So millennials see it the worst, then Gen Xers, then Gen Z, and then baby boomers. About 45% of American couples, those who are married or in a civil partnership, it's a common law, as it used to be called. I don't know if that terminology is still around, but sort of a common law marriage. People who have that long-term life partner. 45% of them said that they and their partner do not know everything about each other's finances. So almost half of the married or committed population has no clue about the other's finances. They don't know everything. Again, that's a formula for a disaster. You need to know. And this includes 29% who say they know most things, 11% who say they know some things, 3% who say they know almost nothing, and 2% who say they know absolutely nothing. I have a hard time understanding how you're living in a household with someone and you have no idea about their finances. You don't know what money they make. You don't know how much they're spending. You don't know if there's any debt. You don't know their view on money, saving, spending. If you're in a Christian church, are they tithing? Are they giving offerings? All of those things are important to know. Maybe it's just me. Give me a call. Let me know, what are your thoughts about this? And if you disagree with the way it came out in terms of generations, maybe you're a millennial and you don't think it's that bad. Whatever the case might be, you can give me a call, 412-213-8995, or text me at 412-218-3888. Let me give you a little bit more, some more numbers here, because again, I like doing research and I just find all of this stuff fascinating. I'm the kind of person who, many times as I'm watching television, my phone is not far from me. And if I hear something in a news feed or on a commercial or something and it sounds interesting, I might go check it out. Or maybe an actor is mentioned. I don't know much about them. While I'm watching the show, I check it out. So forgive me for giving you all this information, but that's who I am. It gives me the confidence to be able to speak about things intelligently because I've done my homework. So anyway, 55% of those folks say they and their partner know everything about each other's finances, as opposed to the 45% who said they know little or nothing. And baby boomers who are married or living with a partner are the most likely to say they know everything about each other's finances, followed by millennials and then Gen Xers and then Gen Zers. So overall, all Americans in a committed relationship, out of all of them, basically one in four, which is basically 25%, it is 25%, say they are keeping secret minor sources of debt. So there's some debt their spouse knows about, but not all of it. Or it might be some expenses they're keeping secret, or some income. Maybe they have some residual income coming in from something aside from their 9 to 5. They're keeping those things secret. About 25% of people are keeping those things secret. I know when I watch older movies, old television documentaries and things, there was a mindset back in the day when women did not work outside of the home. You would hear a lot about women who would, take a little bit off of the grocery money or something to put it away, put it in a coffee can or in a cookie jar or something. It was kind of the just in case money. I'm not sure if that was a great idea, but if the intent was just in case we come upon hard times, I've got a little put away for us, that makes sense. That's a good thing. But if you're doing it so that you can have the benefit of that money that you're putting away, then again, that would be considered the financial infidelity. And so that's sort of like these people who are keeping secrets about income and expenses. And then we know that 11% of the people surveyed say they're not discussing credit scores, credit histories, sources of savings or investment at all. Many people may not know their partner's exact credit score, because I would venture to say most of us don't even know our own exact credit score. Unless you're somebody that checks on that kind of thing all the time, credit scores can fluctuate. So you may not know your own, much less someone else's, but I think you have at least a general idea, and you should have a general idea. Is my partner in the 700s, the 800s, or are they down there in the 400s? I mean, those kind of discrepancies, those things are important to know. Not only, I mean, it's not a matter of just wanting to be in their business or because you think it's going to interfere with the relationship, but if you're making purchasing decisions, it's important to know. If we're trying to get a loan for a new car, or if we want to open a credit card to buy, at a furniture store to get some furniture, you need to know whether or not your credit score and your partner's credit score is sufficient that you will probably get accepted, or are you going to be rejected? So those kinds of things are important to know. And then 9% say that they are keeping major sources of debt, expenses, and income a secret. Now, I don't know what the survey considered to be major. And while 9% in the overall scheme of things may not be a large number, when you think about 9% of couples keeping those kinds of secrets, that's a big deal. And 3% say they are keeping some other financial secret. They just said other. We don't know exactly what it is. 9% of those say they don't know how to categorize the secrets they're keeping. So they don't necessarily think of it as maybe a source of income, or they don't think about it as a debt. But any money that's coming into your house is a source of income. Any money that's leaving your house is an expense. And some people probably want to split hairs and say, well, it was never figured into our household budget anyway. But if you've got to skirt around the issue, then it's probably financial infidelity. So when we think about money or other assets, it is important to know which of those things belong just to you or belong to you and your partner. Among the people who were not sharing financial information with their spouse or partner, 28% say the primary reason is that they feel they should be allowed to keep some information to themselves. And we might have mixed feelings about that. There may be some people who feel as if I should be able to hold on to something for my own independence, but the psychologist in me wants to ask why. What are you afraid of? There's got to be some underlying fear of something that's causing you to want to hold on to this. So I've got a caller on the line, and I would love to know what the caller has to say. So, hi, this is Dr. Linda. You have a question or a comment? I'm not able to hear if the caller is speaking. I'm not hearing the caller. So I will let the production team work that out. Let me know if something is fixed, and I will go back to the person who had a comment or question. All right. So let me see. Where was I? Okay. 15% of the people who say they're not sharing financial information, 15% say they do not want the other person to know. That's why they don't share it. Again, I would be questioning why. What is it? What are your motives behind that? And 14% say they would feel embarrassed if the other person knew. Some people, I guess their credit is so bad or the debt is so high that it's a source of embarrassment. All right, that caller had to hang up, unfortunately. Hopefully, they'll call back again. We've got some comments coming through. I have not been checking my YouTube feed, but fortunately, I've got a production team that does. So let's just see what's going on. All right. So we have some folks who are saying, let's see, bear with me for a second here, guys. Oh, I see. All right. We'll have to come back to some of the comments, but keep them coming. And if you are in a position to give us a call, certainly you might have to hang up. Something might come up. But if that's the case, then just give us a call back. I will be right here waiting for you. Okay. All right. Okay. So we're talking about secrets and we're talking about money. Assets. Secrets can take on an entire life of their own and undermine the trust and the relationship. And so some people say that the fix is communication. Just talk about it, be open, be transparent, don't hide these things from one another. You don't necessarily need to combine all of your finances with your partner. Some people have a philosophy of doing that. They combine everything, they have joint accounts, etc. Other people don't. That's not the important part. At least that's what the financial advisors say. It doesn't matter whether you combine the money or not, but you do need to be aware of where money is going. Even if you each agree to maintain separate accounts, it's important to understand the parameters and work together on some shared financial goals. We have a deception epidemic going on right now, and roughly 42% of Americans living with a partner admit to keeping some kind of money secret. We've covered that. We talked about it in terms of generations, the breakdown, etc. Now, since we are based in Pittsburgh, this is Pittsburgh's DSEN, I looked at Pennsylvania law. I wanted to see what does that say for the majority of our listeners. Now, granted, we do have over 72,000 listeners from around the world. However, we're based in Pennsylvania. So let's look at Pennsylvania law. According to Pennsylvania law, assets owned before marriage do not automatically become joint property. That could be a good thing or a not so good thing. Because again, if you think about it, if let's say it's a home or a car or a boat or whatever the case might be, if it were joint property, then not only do you become responsible for the asset, but for the liability as well. And so if you're in possession, if you own certain things, whether it's a physical asset or money, before you get married, they remain your separate non-marital property in the state of Pennsylvania, provided you do not commingle them with marital funds. So, for instance, you might have $20,000 that belongs to you, and there's a joint account somewhere. Maybe that joint account might be in some sort of, maybe it's in a 401k, maybe it's some kind of an IRA, whatever it might be. You might want to take that money and put it with the family money so that you get a higher rate of return. Once you do that, once you commingle it with marital funds, it has now become a marital asset. So in other words, it's not just your money. You can't say, well, okay, I know we've got 30 in the bank, but 20 of that is mine. No, once you commingle, your partner has equal rights to the entire 30. Or if you legally transfer it into the joint names. So if you own a house prior to getting married, and then you legally transfer it. You refinance and go through the process so that maybe both names are now on the house, even if it's not a refinance, even if you just go and have them added to the deed, you have now made that marital property. And like I said, in some cases that might be good because it's an asset, but that means you're also sharing in any of the liability. So separate property can lose its status and become subject to equitable distribution in a divorce. That's a little bit different. Now, if you're going through a divorce, commingled funds, joint titling, appreciation, all of those things get taken into consideration by the judge at that particular point in time. But I thought it was good to know that in the state of Pennsylvania, what's yours is yours, what's mine is mine, as long as we keep them separate and don't commingle. So that's entirely up to you. That is not the case all around the country. So depending on where you're listening from, you might want to check on some of that, because if you have some assets that were yours prior to, then you need to understand whether or not they are now joint marital property or if it still belongs solely to you. And there are all kinds of reasons why people would want to keep things separate. Maybe you are not a very trusting person. Maybe you've been in a bad marriage before and as they say, lost your shirt. And so you're trying to keep from that happening again. There could be all kinds of things. Maybe there's some betrayal that has taken place in another area of the marriage. And so now you don't trust them in this area. All right. My caller is back. I'm so glad you called back in. Are you on the line, caller? I am not hearing anyone. Unfortunately, I am still not able to hear that particular caller. So what we might have to do, if we can't get it so that I can hear them, is maybe you get the gist of it and either tell me or text it to me so that I can respond. I would love to hear their comment and share it. And if it's a question, I'd love to be able to answer it. We're asking people to call in and share with us. So I want to make sure that I do give them. Okay, I'm hearing something now. Caller, are you there? No, sounded like the mic opened up a little bit, but I'm not hearing them. Hello? All right, I'm going to keep moving. Actually, we're coming up on our break, about 2 minutes out from break. So before we break, I just want to talk about something that they call a trauma safety net. And again, there are all kinds of terms out there for different things, but basically, if you defend the hidden account for a moment, for many people, a runaway fund is a trauma response. Sometimes people are pulling money apart and keeping a separate account in case they need to run away. Now, if that's your mindset, then you have to question, are you fully committed to the marriage in the first place or the partnership in the first place? And as I said, maybe it's coming from a previous bad experience. You may have experienced some trauma, or maybe you saw your parents go through a messy divorce or something that was traumatizing and it's causing you to behave in certain ways. That's a clear indicator that some healing needs to take place. And I would strongly advise anybody who is in that space to seek some sort of help, some sort of counseling. That doesn't mean that you don't have money put aside just in case. But if you're doing it because you think you might need to run away, then there's something deeper that's going on, either in you or in the marriage or both. So, those are just some things to keep in mind as we think about the money and whose money is it, yours, mine, or ours. So, with that, we are up at our first break. And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about money. We're not ready to switch to secrets just yet. But come on back, hang in there with me. This is Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing on Pittsburgh's DSEN.
Yes, each Saturday we throw it back with some of the best old school music, funk, R&B, old school, rap, hip hop, and all the jams that make you move and dance. Yes, check it out. Each Saturday right here on Pittsburgh's DSEN. All the old school jams, 6 to 11 p.m.
Pittsburgh, have you seen our Sunday radio schedule? Ooh, it is lit. Start the day off with our Sunday gospel music from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. It will inspire you and have you praising the Lord. Then from 3 to 8 p.m., we bring you Sunday jazz melody for all the jazz lovers. Then cap off the night with the Quiet Storm from 8 to 11 p.m. to hear the best smooth, romantic, and soulful R&B sounds of yesterday and today. All that each Sunday on Pittsburgh's DSEN, the place for soul.
Hello?
At first we started out real cool, taking me places I ain't never been, but now you're getting comfortable, ain't doing those things.
All right, welcome back. Welcome back. I'm Dr. Linda Bing, and in this hour on Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing, we're talking about what happens when two people get married and one of them has money or other assets that they do not reveal to their partner. Who do those assets belong to? Do they belong to that individual solely, or do they belong to both of them? Now, we know that if you're living in the state of Pennsylvania, as long as you don't commingle, what you bring into the relationship belongs to you. So if you've got a comment or question, 412-213-8995 is the number to call. 412-218-3888 is the number if you want to send a text. Okay, so we've got a caller on the line. Third time is the charm. I know I'm going to hear them this time. Caller, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. What's your comment or question?
Hello, Linda. This is Al Perry. How are you?
Al Perry, I am doing well. I'm doing well. For those of you who don't know the joke, Al Perry and my husband grew up together. They are lifelong friends, and now we're all in the fold together. What's going on, Al Perry?
Well, I listen to your show, and you're doing a fantastic job, so I'll say that
Thank
first.
you.
But, I decided to call in today because, most of us old school people grew up with, your money is our money, but her money is hers, right? And,
Yeah.
over time, a lot of men just decided, look, you know, just like the woman held money back in the days, we need to make sure that we can support ourselves too in case the marriage ends, because those assets commingle and PA, as you said, get divided in half. But if you came in with more than your spouse, that's not really fair. Like if you had $1 million, I'll make it up, and she had $10, when she put her $10 in, why is she entitled to half?
I mean, it's a good question. It's a good question. So I'm going to address that from two different perspectives. And again, thank you, because you remember when I started doing this show, you were like, Linda, I'm going to listen, but I'm not calling in. So we broke through, and I appreciate it. But that's where the whole idea about prenups came from, with the prenuptial agreements, because people do think about, is it fair if that person didn't bring enough in? And that really is on a personal level. I do think in some situations, someone may be contributing more financially, but what is the other person contributing? If the person who contributes the most financially, obviously they're not, you got $1 million, you're probably not marrying for money. So what are you marrying for? Maybe you're marrying for companionship and affection and protection and the love and the closeness. And so you might see it as equal if they live up to their part. I'm holding it down with the bills, you hold it down with these other things that I married you for. And so in some ways, for some people, that might be a balanced type of relationship. And then I would also, you're a man of God as well. So I would also talk about it from a biblical perspective. The two become one flesh. So if the two are now one, do you have yours and I have mine, or is everything ours? So really, I think the most important thing is that the two people in the situation get on the same page with that. It really doesn't matter what the rest of us think, as long as, if you're, a person of faith, you need to make sure that you are in alignment with what you believe the word is telling you about how that money gets allocated. And in addition to that, you have to make sure that you and your partner are on the same page. So yeah, I think the human side of us, particularly if you're the person who's coming in with the most, you might have some of those thoughts about why should they be equal to it. But it is something to think about. It really is. So thank you.
Just another question. What
Yep.
about when you have kids that you're supporting, and then all of a sudden, things change in the marriage, right? And now we have to talk about, being equitable. But you're children. I mean, it's not just you and the wife; it's you, the wife, and the children, right? And if you have children
Right.
that are not hers, right, that brings a whole other. What would
It
you say to that?
does. Yeah, so you're breaking up a little bit, but I think what I got from it is you get married and you have children. And I'm not saying you specifically, but in the situation, two people get married. He has children from a previous relationship, so they're not the current spouse's children. Now, are you asking about supporting that child? Is that what the question is about? Because it was going out.
Well, you're supporting that child, right? And now all of a sudden, now you got to give half. Now all of a sudden, not only do you know, suffer, but so does the child. How do you ensure that the child is also taken care of in a situation where economics need to be divided based on a relationship that is not being fruitful at this point?
Yeah, great question. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who are facing that situation. Coming into the marriage, if the new spouse, the new wife understands that I have a child that I am responsible to take care of, then you just have to make that adjustment. There's less to go around for everyone, but you still have an obligation to that child. So you may not be able to give that child the same amount of money unless it's court mandated. You want to do what the court say, or you could go back to court and try to get that rearrange, get them to change the judgment based on your new financial situation. But particularly now, when so many people have been displaced and the economy is different, you might be in that situation. But the same way you and your spouse have to cut back on some of the things taking place in the household, you also have to explain to that child and to the co-parent that things have changed. You're still there. You're going to provide what you can, but you are not in a position to provide as much as you used to. Hopefully, the spouse will understand. I know there are lots of situations out there where they would not, but you still have to live up to that obligation to take care of that child. They're just not able to get as much or as often. And, that's another situation where you have to talk about, okay, not just with the money and the property, but with the children. Is it yours, mine, or ours? Because if we are considering the fact that this is my child through marriage, This is my bonus kid. That's how I refer to my daughter. She's not my stepdaughter. She's my bonus child. But that doesn't mean that if she got into trouble, I would not help her financially the same way that I help my two sons that I gave birth to. So again, it's all about your philosophy. And are we all in, going into the situation when you know that there are children that are not yours? Are we all in? And is everybody being treated equally or not? So yeah, it's just another one of those layers that we have to peel back, which is again why I am such a big proponent of mindset. You have got to be on the same page and you have to talk, because as things shift, your perspective and your opinion may shift. Talk about it. But if you have a similar or the same foundation, if you can open that book, for us in our household, it's the Bible. In another home, it might be the Quran. I mean, whatever it is, you need to be able to go back to the foundation, because a higher power than you has said, this is how it needs to be. And you've got to be okay with going along with whatever that book says. So thank you, Al. You're going to call again. You are going to call me on another show, but I'm so glad that you called. Thank you.
Thank you for the insight. Appreciate your input.
All right. Thanks, you too.
Yep.
For those of you who are listeners, if you listen to the show, as another aside, Al was somewhat instrumental in developing the relationship that got me this spot on Pittsburgh's DSCN. So we love him dearly, and I thank him for all that he has done in that respect. All right, so Al brings us to a good point, though, because we're thinking, when you think about that, that's why some people have prenuptial agreements. And I know that a prenup can sound like a terrible thing. Don't you trust me? Or why are you thinking that the marriage is going to end? But you do have to I believe, you do have to take certain things into consideration. And so I'm not necessarily saying that everybody who, is in a situation where one person is making millions and the other is not, I'm not saying that they have to have a prenup, but they definitely need to talk to some kind of financial advisor, see what makes the most sense. Because it could be, you don't want someone to take advantage of you, and you need to put those things in writing while everything is good. Because even though you might be the best of friends and you think this is a relationship that will stand the test of time, people can change once things get ugly or divorce comes into the picture, even if it's mutually agreed upon, no infidelity or anything. People can change, and especially when money is involved. So you do have to think about that, and you think about what's your threshold. Let's say that the numbers are smaller, like we're talking $50,000 as opposed to $5 million. Then how do you feel about it? Do you feel like, okay, well, that's not such a big number, I'd be okay with it? And what about the reverse? Would you want a prenup? If you're the one with the millions, would you want a prenup to protect your assets? Would you sign one if your fiance asked you to? Are prenups about protecting assets, or is it a form of selfishness? And if your spouse had money put aside and then you fell on hard times, would you expect them to use those funds to help get you out of trouble? All of that falls into, how are we thinking about this? Have the two become one, and is my money, and your money, or are we all in this together? Al said something about the money where he said, his money is our money and her money is her money, or something to that effect. A lot of things happen like that, somewhat in jest, but not completely, in relationships. There's certain things that I think women, particularly old school women, if you're Gen X, baby boomer, if you're in those generations, we have a tendency to take ownership of a lot as a woman. Some of it has to do with how we were socialized, particularly in the Black community, and that's a whole nother show. But you'll talk about things like, my house, my money. It doesn't necessarily mean, when we say stuff like that, that we don't see it as your house and your money. It's just the attitude of everything we have belongs to me. Everything we have belongs to me. Some of these things, yes, they belong to you too, but just understand everything belongs to me. That's more of a cultural statement, I think, than it is a financial statement. So, but these are all questions that need to be asked. And a lot of us, we're talking about this, but we have been married for years. There are people who've been married for decades. that's not the time to talk about it. The best time to talk about it is up front while things are good. Know what the situation is going to be. And that doesn't mean that you might not revisit it at some point in time, but at least go into it with an understanding. So people usually hide premarital assets out of fear. They're afraid that they're going to lose them in a divorce. They're afraid that I have built up all of this stuff, maybe with or without your help, and I don't want to see it disappear. So a desire to avoid paying spousal support, or sometimes just a lack of trust in the relationship. Those are all things that impact it. Even if you got it while you were single, these assets can become subject to division if commingled with the marital property or according to a judge in a divorce decree. Some of the most common reasons that someone hides money, because for some people it might seem inconceivable. Why would anybody do that? For other people, it probably sounds normal. Like, of course, why would you not do that? So a few reasons. One could be divorce anticipation. If you're someone who just looking at life and the statistics and knowing that the numbers range from 40% to 50% of all first time marriages end in divorce, and 60% of second time marriages end in divorce, and 70% of third time marriages end in divorce. If you just follow the numbers, you might want to have an error on the side of caution and make sure that you are protecting assets. So sometimes it's not necessarily that I don't trust you, my spouse, my partner. I'm just looking at the world basically the way I think is realistic, and I just need to protect myself. Sometimes people hide money because of financial control. You know, they want to make sure that they have their complete autonomy and they have their own money. Again, it can come from those same kind of reasons. It happens lots of times, or I've seen it more with women than with men. There are women who, yes, you might make a lot of money, but I need to have my own. It reminds me of a man that I knew some years ago. He was, I would say his net worth was probably about $5 million, and it's self-made. He was doing really well. And his wife had a good job. She made at that time, and this was a few years ago, I want to say this might be as much as 10, 12 years ago. At that time, she was making six figures, you know, probably close to $200,000. But when your husband has 5 million, there are a lot of people who would say, why are you working? And for her, it really was a matter of, I want to have my own. That was how she felt about it. I want to have my own. Now, he did give her whatever you want to call it, an allowance, a stipend, whatever. She got several $1,000s a month from him and the money that he was making. So she was able to keep the money that she was making as well as the money that he was giving her. That worked for them. You have to figure out what works for you. Another reason is supporting a secret life. Now, this, of course, this is a little nefarious. You got to watch out for that. But sometimes people have habits that they know their spouse would not approve of. You know, it doesn't have to be something with infidelity because it's a secret life. It could be you can have a gambling problem, substance abuse, shopping addiction. There could be other things that you know your spouse would not support. You don't want to give them up, so you keep it a secret. Another one could be support obligations, attempting to lower reported income or visible wealth to minimize child support or alimony payments, something along those lines. So some people minimize, they have some obligations to support someone else. And in order to not pay out as much, they keep that secret from everybody. And then the last one would be sort of the exit strategy. If your partner has an exit fund, it implies that they already have one foot out the door, or at least their mind is heading in that direction. So how can a marriage really be all in? Are we both all in if one person is already funding a backup plan, funding an exit, if you will? You have to make sure that we're on the same page. We're on the same page. Many of these things that I'm mentioning, there's no right or wrong to it per se. There is what's right for us. What have we agreed to? Now, some of the things, yes, there's some things that I would say are just wrong. The reason being, they're going to lead to the demise of your relationship. And above all, you need to be honest. Just as a person, you need to be honest. But there are other things that you can play it either way as long as you're both on the same side. So you have to understand why your partner is not all in and discuss how to move forward. is there something you can do to help build the trust? Is there something you can do to assure them that they don't have anything to worry about? What is it that you need to do? Some people come from poverty situations, and because they didn't have anything growing up, they are inclined to put money away to make sure that just in case something bad happens, I never have to go back to the situation that I was in before. So a lot of this is emotional. When we talk about finances, there's an emotional undercurrent behind the finances, whether it is fueling a love of money or whether it's fueling your escape plan, whatever the case happens to be. We know that there's an emotional component to it, and you can't really solve the financial piece unless you get to the relational piece as well. All right, let me just check out YouTube here, see if I see anything that I need to address. And I do not. I know there's something in here because I was told there are. So let me see, make sure that I sign in again. YouTube is being extra. It wants me to scan codes and do all kinds of things. So I will do that on a break, which is coming up in about 10 minutes. I will definitely go and check. So if you're commenting or you have questions on YouTube, just hang in there and know that I will check all of that out on the break and I will respond to you on the air. All right. Got another message. Okay. I hope you're enjoying the conversation and getting something out of it because that's what this is all about. It really is. It's about sharing information, making sure that relationships are healthy, whether you're just starting out or you are, in it for the long haul and you've been at it for a while, which reminds me, and I will mention this again, but let me just do a quick plug for next week. I've got another guest. I'll be joined by a guest next week. Next week, my guest, her name is Ashley Cobb. She is a sexologist and she's written a book. She's on tour right now with the book. She just came back from the Essence Festival and she is just making things happen in that space. But the book is called Pleasure Please. And it's a lot about the intimacy, the sexual pleasure in relationships. It does have a focus on women, I will say that. But those are some of the things that she will be talking about and helping us with. So again, you might have a great relationship, you might have a great sex life, but I promise you there's something that you'll be able to pick up from Ashley. All right, so I've got a few hellos from Pittsburgh. Hey, right back at you. And I have someone. Oh, thank you so much. There's someone who is reaching out from Ambridge, Beaver County, Pennsylvania, and saying that we have a wonderful show. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate you for listening. I am not proficient in Pennsylvania geography. Okay. I'm not sure what part of the state that's in. I don't know what cities are in that county, but I'm glad you're able to get us and you are tuning in. Only thing that would make this better is if you tell your family and friends that they need to tune in as well. All right, so let's go back. We've got a little bit more to cover before we take our next break. And after the next break, we are going to shift gears. So this hour, we focused it on money. And is it yours or mine? We're looking at when people have assets coming into a marriage, who does it belong to? It varies by state, but regardless of what the state says, it really is something, in my opinion, that you need to work out and be on the same page with because you don't want to have discord in the home, in the marriage, because you can't see eye to eye on those things. So here are some recommended next steps. If this is a situation that is real for you right now, define your boundaries. Stop, take a look at it. Don't try to force the other person to care about things the way you do or to match your energy on something. Just focus on setting clear limits on what you're willing to tolerate in terms of, emotional and practical effort. What is it that I'm willing to do? Where can you come up with a compromise so that maybe from this point moving forward, we have a meeting of the minds? We're going to reevaluate some things. We're going to put some boundaries in place to make sure that we're handling income and expenses and credit and property, all of that, that we're handling it in a way that we both think is fair and equitable. Another step could be to seek some neutral perspective. Many times people say, and when I was younger, I felt this way too. People would say, well, I don't need a financial planner. I don't have enough money for them to plan with. Many of us fall back on that. Like I said, when I was younger, that was my misconception as well. But a good financial planner will help you figure out how to make more out of the money that you have. What are some of your financial goals and what are some things you need to do in order to get there? They will help you establish a budget and some habits to stick to it, etc. So get that neutral perspective. Find out from someone who is wiser in that area and understand how money works. It's unfortunate that in school we're not educated on how money works. There's some people who in their families, they get that. But then there are other people who, because their families have never really had money to work with, don't have a good understanding of how it works. It goes back to, remember the old book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki? And his biological dad was the poor dad. And so he adopted emotionally into a family that had a rich dad. And that's how he learned how money works and what to do. So sometimes you need to find someone who can bring a different perspective in. Unfortunately, many people don't even realize that there is a different perspective. It's like a fish in water. When a fish is in water, it doesn't know that there's, a world out there without water. Your surroundings are everything to you. But also a neutral perspective could be getting some counseling. If you have some emotional trauma around money, if you feel like it's having a negative impact on your relationship, then you might need a licensed counselor to come in and help you set those boundaries that I mentioned a few minutes ago. You also want to take a marital inventory. Look objectively at the state of your marriage, the assets, the expenses, the credit scores, and try to determine if this is a temporary slump or if it's a fundamental incompatibility. Now, if it's an incompatibility, that's not a prescription to, we're incompatible, we need to end this. That's not what that means. You just, again, have to get other people to help you get on the same page when it comes to those things and work it out. Work it out. How are we going to treat the assets that we have and the things that we share? And what can we do jointly to help you get out of your temporary slump of bad credit score, low income, whatever the case might be? So in anticipation of what might be some objections, I found a couple. One common objection in this space that we're talking about is that everyone has a right to financial privacy. It's my money, I earned it. That is the perspective of many. And so one way to respond to that is there's a massive difference between financial privacy and financial secrecy. Privacy is having a personal account for your hobbies that your partner knows nothing about. Secrecy is deliberately hiding $20,000 because you don't trust your partner's reaction or what their future might hold. So marriage is a legal and an emotional merger. Hiding assets is a breach of contract. You want to take a look at where are we emotionally with this and know the difference between privacy and secrecy. And what is your motive? You can do the right thing for the wrong reason, and then it still becomes the wrong thing. So you have to examine your motives. Let me say that again. I got a little tongue tied. You could do the right thing for the wrong reason, and it then becomes the wrong thing. So make sure that whatever you're doing, there's really good sound rationale behind it. And maybe let your partner in on the why. Maybe they'll understand. If you tell your partner, I'm putting a little money away in case we hit on a rainy day, okay, they might understand. Now it's not a secret. And maybe you don't reveal how much it is. You're keeping the amount private. That's okay. But you're communicating. One more, and then we'll take a break. So another objection that's common has to do with that runaway fund that I talked about, when people are putting money away just in case they need an out. So a runaway fund is necessary for safety, especially for women. That's the objection. That's what some women would say. I think a lot of that mentality comes from back in the day when women were not working outside of the home, or if they were working, they were not on par with their spouse with respect to income. He was the primary breadwinner. She could not live a good quality life on what she made by herself. So she often felt like having that fund was for safety, or should something go wrong in the marriage and I need to get out quick, fast, and in a hurry. So, one way that the professionals, the experts in this area, have responded to that objection is to say that in situations of abuse, a safety fund is absolutely necessary and life saving. First of all, I would hope that if you're in a situation of abuse, and I think maybe we'll do a show on that as well, if you're in a situation of abuse, the first thing is to get to safety. But yes, you do need to have a safety fund so that you can leave. But if you are in a healthy, safe relationship and you still feel the need to hide a massive exit fund just in case, you are not building a marriage. You are actively funding a backup plan, which means you've already decided that failure is a likely option. So again, it's all about the motive. Why are you putting the money away? What is going on? And again, I beg you, if you're in an abusive situation, not only do you need a safety fund, but you need a whole plan and program of how you're going to get out. The most important thing is to get out. I know people want to consider other things, but what about kids and where will I go? Those things can come later. So we are at the end of our first segment. Time for another break. That does it for this first hour, and I appreciate you hanging in there with me. After the break, we'll take a look at the boundaries of friendship. You know, when you find out something about your best friend's spouse, do you tell them or do you keep it to yourself? That's the topic when we come back. This is Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing on Pittsburgh's DSEN.
Looking for a cost-effective way to help increase your company's bottom line? Look no further than Soul Pit Media. With our award-winning print, internet, podcast, and Soul Pit television options, we can help your business get to that next level. For more information, contact Craig Dawson at 412-407-7685. That's 412-407-7685. And let Soul Pit Media take you to that next level.
Business owners thinking about back-to-school promotions and replacing summer flavors with pumpkin? What about your taxes? Reduce your stress and tax liabilities by planning for tax time now with Cameron Professional Services Group. CPSG takes your goals, values, and visions to create a custom tax plan catered specifically to your business. We work closely with you to ensure that as your business grows and goals shift, so will your custom plan. Located in the Hill District in Pittsburgh, PA, CPSG is a CPA and consultant firm, providing services in accounting, auditing, tax planning and preparation, community development, and operational management. Call Cameron Professional Services Group today at 412-251-0607.
Have you had the Beat by Niche experience? Beat by Niche is one of the top makeup artists in the city of Pittsburgh. She's touched the face of Cardi B, love and hip-hop personalities, and various Steeler wives. If you have not sat in her chair, what are you waiting for? Visit beatbyniche.com to schedule your special makeover for all occasions: weddings, graduations, proms, photo ops, and more. Visit beatbyniche.com and experience the touch of excellence.
Everything that I've been doing is all bad. I got a chick on the side with a crib and a ride. I've been telling you so many lies, ain't none good, it's all bad. And I just wanna confess it's been going on so long. Girl, I've been doing you so wrong. And I want you to know that everything that I've been doing is all bad. I got a chick on the side with a crib and a ride. I've been telling you so many lies, ain't none good, it's all bad. And I just wanna confess it's been going on so long. Girl, I've been doing you
All right. Welcome back. I've been waiting for you. Welcome back to Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing, right here on Pittsburgh's own DSEN. All right, so I'm Still trying to make this YouTube thing work. Nothing wants to cooperate with me tonight. But Hez, if you get a chance, maybe take a screenshot, take a photo, send it to me so I can acknowledge the people tuning in on LinkedIn. I'm sorry, on YouTube. So in our first hour, we talked about money and secrets associated with money. Well, we're still talking about secrets, but now we're going to shift to something totally different. So as we go into this next hour, if you have a question or a comment, the number to call is 412-213-8995. Or if you'd rather text, 412-218-3888. Okay, so we already know that secrets can be tricky, especially between friends. I'm going to give you a situation and see what you think about it. Okay, so here's the situation. We're calling it the modern moral dilemma. Okay, let's say that you are out at a restaurant and you see your best friend's spouse out with someone else. Now, I know that just because they're out with someone of the opposite sex does not mean that they're cheating. I know, I get it. But in this case, you see hugging and kissing and caressing and hand holding, feeding one another, things that clearly indicate this is not your cousin. Okay, this is not your friend. This is something more than that. So I want to know, what do you do? I don't know about you, but to me, that kind of behavior is inappropriate. First of all, why is all that going on in the restaurant? But that's a whole nother story. You see it going on. Maybe it's not in a restaurant, maybe it's someplace else, movie theater, whatever. But you are clear that your best friend's spouse is involved with this person. And so the way I see it, you've got four options when it comes to how do you handle that situation. All right. So one option is you could confront them right there on the spot. Another option is talk to the spouse. Don't go to your friend, but talk to the spouse, not on the spot, but at another point in time. A third option would be to tell your friend. And the fourth option would be to just keep your mouth closed. Now, if you think of another option, by all means, let me know. But for me, those are the four. So which option do you choose? I'm going to talk about all of them and try to look at some of the pros and cons of each one so that maybe, hopefully, you will never come into this particular situation. But let's think about it, because even if it never happens, isn't it just good sometimes to process information? It makes you more clear on who you are and what you stand for. So, did a little research. Overall, men report higher rates of infidelity. Now, again, this is self-reported information. It does not necessarily mean that men cheat more than women, but there's a higher rate of reports. So, 20% with men as opposed to 13% with women. Those are the percentages of people who say that they have been involved in some form of infidelity. And we have to note that the gender gap is closing. So among adults under 30, women are slightly more likely to cheat than men. Women under 30, slightly more likely to cheat than men. And men are more motivated by the thrill or sexual desire, whereas women are often cheating because of some emotional void. What the research tells us. You have a different view? I'd love to hear it. So the gap in infidelity statistics shifts dramatically based on age, race, and the definition of an affair. Here's some key differences. In the age trends, men's infidelity rates peak in their 50s and 70s. Isn't that interesting? Women's rates are highest in their 60s. So it skipped over 60s with the men. It wasn't in their 50s through 70s. It was that men's infidelity rates peak in their 50s and in their 70s, whereas women's infidelity rates are highest in their 60s. And with respect to the type of affair, women account for the majority of emotional only affairs. So may not be any sexual activity going on, but it's still an emotional affair because of the intimate conversations and the nature of things that they share about themselves, their marriage, etc. While men comprise the bulk of the physical only affairs. Many times with men, what they report is that there was no emotional connection. It was all physical. Because many of the surveys strictly measure physical sex, they may systematically underestimate infidelity in women. So Yeah, we have to keep that in mind. Most of the surveys about infidelity are looking at physical sex, and we already know that there are other ways to cheat. So let's look at what are some of the pros and cons of confronting that person right there on the spot. Well, for one, you're going to create an embarrassing situation. You know, you're likely to get some drama elicited. For all you know, the let I'm going to say that it's the man who's cheating. And that's because there's some other things that'll come out later and it makes it easier. So just go with me. Trust me. Know that I am not male bashing. I'm not saying that men cheat more than women, even though the data says that they do. Just go with me on this one. Okay. So a woman is out. She sees her best friend's husband out with some other woman. If you confront right on in that situation, for all you know, the other woman might know that he has a wife. She might not care that he has a wife. And so this big argument for nothing is for nothing because she already knows. There may be harsh words, yelling, throwing of things, punches thrown. Who knows what may go on? So, one way, if you are determined to confront it on the spot, just say hello. Just let him know that you saw him. You can just say hello. That's better than calling them out. You can ask about your friend. These are not what I would recommend, but these are some of the ways you can do it. You can ask about your friend. So when you say hello, hey, how's Susie Q? Create the discord because what happens then is that the woman is likely to ask, oh, who's Susie Q? So many times when people choose to confront on the spot, they either just walk up and say hello, they call the person out, or they ask about the wife. Anytime they do any of those things, it does put the cheater on notice. And basically what it's saying is, I see you and you need to clean this up. You need to say something to your wife before I do. So that's just one of the ways that people address it. I told you there were 4. That's confronting on the spot. That's a look at what may happen. Another option is to not say anything in the moment, but speak to the spouse privately at a later date. So maybe on occasion, you're going to run into them somewhere, you make it happen. Maybe you have their phone number because, you're part of a friend group, everybody's cool. Whatever the case might be, you can let them know privately what you saw. You don't have to ask for any additional information, no explanation. They don't owe you any of that. Just let them know that you know. And let them know what you believe to be true based on what you saw. And you can leave it up to them to do the right thing, but you may never know if they do. So if you choose this option, be prepared for any reaction that you might get from them. They might deny it. They might get angry. If it were the reverse and it's a woman that you're confronting, there might be tears. Men cry too, but they probably wouldn't in that particular situation, but who knows? There are just a number of things you have to be prepared for. Now, of course, you can say to them, if you don't tell her, I'm going to, but then how do you know whether or not it was ever revealed to her? Because she may not come back and tell you that she learned from him what he had been doing. And if you bring it up to her, well, now you've done option number 3, tell your friend. So when people choose this option, before deciding to share with your friend, there's a lot to consider. Would your friend want to know? Maybe they don't want to know. Would you want to know? Some people would rather not know. Some people are like, you know what? Everything is flowing. Things are working well. We have a good relationship. He's taking care of the home. Some people are of the mindset that all men cheat. So what are you going to do about it? And I know old school people back in the day, lots of times I've met women, older women, who have told me how they wanted to leave because of cheating. In fact, I know a woman, I worked for her at one point in time. Her husband was cheating with his secretary, and it was a secretary back then, not an administrative assistant. And it was all in her face. People at work knew. They would go to work functions. She would come to the work function and just know that this woman was sleeping with her husband. She would go on certain business trips with him as his secretary. But she went home and told her mother she was leaving. And her mother was like, no. She ran down all the good reasons why she needed to stay and sent her back home. So sometimes we're dealing with that kind of mentality. You have to also think about, is your friend going to believe you? Did they already have some suspicions that now you are confirming? Is your friend going to become angry? Maybe your friend feels like you should have just minded your own business. Sometimes they're lashing out at you because They don't know what else to do. So will it damage your friendship? You would have to think about all of those things if you even think about telling. So the question is to tell or not to tell. Make sure you consider how your friend might react to the news. What kind of response might you get from your friend? So if you're going to tell a friend, think about that. They might go into shock and denial. They might freeze, give you a blank stare, refuse to believe the information. Any of that might happen. They might get angry at you. She might direct her pain towards you because you're right there in the moment and she needs to get it out. So she might yell and scream at you, accuse you of lying, that you're jealous of their situation. You just wanted to stir up drama. Any of that might happen. This sounds like an episode of one of those Real Housewife kind of shows, doesn't it? It could be intense grief. She might become hysterical, start sobbing, hyperventilating, and go into an emotional collapse. Sometimes those things happen. Are you equipped to deal with that? She might become defensive. She might defend her spouse and come up with all kinds of reasons, things that she did wrong that led him to that. She might desperately list reasons why you must be mistaken, or she might demand proof. She will likely press you for exact dates and times. And do you have any text messages? What visual evidence can you show me so that I know this is real? So all of those things might happen, and you would have to be prepared for any and all of that. And then you also have to think about what's going to happen to your friendship. Is there going to be some temporary distance between the two of you? Like she'll need some time to process this trauma. She may pull away from you for a little while, or maybe forever. She might have the shoot the messenger mentality. If she decides to stay with her spouse, she may cut you out because your presence serves as a constant painful reminder of the betrayal. She may be so embarrassed by the fact that you know that now she has cut you out, or he may have her cut you out because, you kind of dropped the dime on him. What's he supposed to do now? It might form a deeper bond. Sometimes she'll accept it, especially if she already had some doubts. She might rely heavily on you for some emotional support, which could create a stronger bond. She might feel like, you really are my ride or die friend, because I know that could not have been easy for you, but you came and you shared that with me. Good looking out. And it might create an awkwardness. If she stays with him and remains your friend, what a future social gathering is going to be like, where everybody is all getting together. And so, do we say anything? Do we speak to them? Do we just kind of nod and acknowledge? What do we do? So all of those things need to be considered if you're thinking about option number 3, tell your friend. You also need to consider the gender of your friend. Now, psychological research and relationship data show that men and women do process and react to infidelity differently. Though both experience extreme distress, these differences usually stem from social conditioning and the whole psychology around trust and betrayal. So just like I told you about my former boss back before I started my own business and I was in the corporate environment, she told her mom, and her mom gave her all the reasons why she needed to go back home to that good man who made good money, took care of her and the kids, didn't put his hands on her. All men cheat. Just let it go. It won't last, and on and on and on. So how do you handle it? How do men and women differ in how they handle it? Well, for women, when we think about the type of betrayal that hurts the most, studies consistently show that women are more distressed by emotional infidelity. So a partner forming a deep emotional bond or falling in love with someone else, that might trigger a higher stress response, reflecting a fear of abandonment and a loss of shared resources. Sometimes women can accept it, a little bit better. Not that they like it, but they might rationalize it was just sex. I'm the one that has the emotional bond with him. Men, on the other hand, they react more aggressively to physical or sexual infidelity, and again, there's a whole psychology behind that. The biological threat. It's a threat to their status, their ego. Now the ego is wounded because somebody, it's almost like a possessive thing, my woman, somebody came along and did something physical with my woman. So that's the way that goes with the hurts. If we're looking at the direction of the initial anger, women respond in a way that when a woman learns her husband is cheating, her anger is often directed inward or toward the relationship, meaning that she is highly likely to experience a deep sadness, a depression, a self-doubt. It's a blow to her self-esteem, her ego, her confidence, and she starts asking about why. Why did this happen to me? She looks at it from the standpoint of, what did I do wrong? Where was I not enough? And she wants to see if the relationship can be repaired. Men, on the other hand, are said to respond in this way. When a man learns that his wife is cheating, his anger is frequently directed outward. So whereas a woman internalizes it, he projects it outward, specifically towards the other man. And the response often becomes this desire to reclaim what he feels like was lost, which many times is his status or his pride. So women internalize it. We look for inward reasons why it happened. Men direct their anger and their feelings outwardly. The way men and women differ when it comes to coping mechanisms and support networks. Women are much more likely to lean on their existing social circles for emotional support. So if you tell a female friend, she may invite you into her processing space, venting to you and using her friends to survive the heartbreak. A woman is more likely to reach out and share it. And, again, the girlfriends rally around, and there might be a little male bashing that goes on, or they might talk about her in ways to boost her up. Don't let that bother you, girl. You still got it going on. Don't worry about it. That's his problem, not your problem, and on and on. Men, on the other hand, are heavily conditioned to see that betrayal as an unforgivable humiliation. Then as a result of that, they are much less likely to seek social support. Men are not typically go with the boys and talk about what happened and my woman got with another man, and because they feel a sense of shame. And so out of that shame, they're not going to say anything. If you tell a male friend, he may shut down, withdraw from you entirely, or demand absolute privacy to avoid looking weak. And then there's the likelihood of reconciliation. So statistically, women are more conditioned by society to forgive, to endure, and to attempt to rebuild the marriage. They are more likely to stay and try to work through the betrayal, which means they are also more likely to experience a shoot the messenger type of mentality, because both things can't be true. I can't be with a man in a healthy relationship if I believe you when you tell me that he's out there cheating on me. So I both can't be true. I'm staying with him, so you've got to go. Men, on the other hand, when a woman cheats, the relationship ends more often than it does with women. Men often view the physical boundaries as absolute. Once it's crossed, it's crossed. And many times it doesn't even matter if he has cheated. But once she cheats, it's done. It's broken. And they find it much harder to reconcile or look past the damage. Again, this is generalized information based on some research. And it may not be true in your situation. It may not even sound realistic to you. But just know that there's a large population of people out there that this does apply to. Give you a little bit more research. Research shows that between 30% and 60%, I know that's a big range, but somewhere between 30% and 60% of betrayed spouses experience symptoms of PTSD. It can be so deep and so real that people have post-traumatic stress disorder. They go into depression, they have anxiety at clinically significant levels. I mean, not just your normal run-of-the-mill anxiety, but so clinically anxious or depressed that they might need medication or treatment or hospitalization, things that suggest PTSD. The impact of discovering a spouse's infidelity goes way beyond hurt feelings, because research also shows us that betrayal can trigger genuine trauma responses with serious health conditions. The medical community increasingly recognizes infidelity as a legitimate source of trauma symptoms. Just think about that. Think about that. Not that I think any of you are considering cheating, but just think about that. You could be causing a significant trauma if you were to step outside of the marriage. And so some of the symptoms, both physiological as well as psychological, how do you know if somebody's experiencing trauma that might be on the level of PTSD? Well, intrusive thoughts and flashbacks to the discovery moment or the details. They keep ruminating on it, running it over and over inside their head. They might become hyper vigilant, which means that they're always on guard, almost like a paranoia, only their paranoia usually is about things that aren't true. Hypervigilance is paranoia about things that are true, and so you have difficulty trusting and you're always on guard looking for the other shoe to drop. There can be sleep disruption, nightmares, night tremors. Sometimes people get an elevated heart rate. They have a hard time concentrating. Sometimes they just become emotionally numb. They go inside themselves to protect themselves from future hurt. And so now they are not available for anybody else in an emotional relationship. And then there are times when the depression and the anxiety can persist, for months or years if people don't get proper support. People sometimes have difficulty functioning. They can't go to work and do their daily responsibilities. I've known of people who have been so depressed that they could not get up out of bed. They've been in bed 2 or 3 days because it's just that bad. So yeah, what we might think as something that just happens in society can have some significant reactions with people. So how would you feel? You have to think about that. How would you feel if your friend experienced any one of those things, or if they ended up divorced because you went back and told them what you saw? Will it make you feel like it's in some way your fault? So again, I'm not advocating for any of these 4 options. We've gotten through 3 of them. I talked about the first one being confront on the spot. The second one, confront later. Third one, telling your friend. Not advocating any of them. I'm just sharing with you what the options are and how some people tend to respond to them, what your options are and what you might want to consider. All right. Check, make sure about messages. The good news, I guess, is that with the right support, those symptoms can be healed. So many people who work through betrayal trauma with somebody who's skilled at guiding them through it, they do report down the line that the intensity of the symptoms decreases with time significantly after working with a trusted guide. Now, that time differs for everyone, but people say time heals all wounds. It's not time that heals all the wounds. It's the treatment. It's the process that you go through that heals the wound. It happens over time, but it's not time that's doing it. And some people just try to tough it out alone. If you do that or pretend that you're okay when you're not, it's often prolonging the suffering. And so now, last but not least, let's look at the burden of the secret. If you decide that you're not going to say anything, it's none of your business, you're going to mind your own business, that works well for some people. But for other people, handling a secret that deep about a friend, remember I said this is your best friend. So handling something that is so deep about your best friend's spouse can be incredibly difficult for people. Not because, you're a gossip and you just can't wait to tell, or, you feel superior, you got the one up, but you can just feel so deeply for that person. And you can feel like you are betraying her by not sharing with her something that you know. So when a secret like that involves someone close to you, sometimes the psychological impact gets to be so big because your brain is constantly running these worst case scenarios about their relationship and what might happen as a result of her not knowing. So keeping the secret sometimes means that you are actively lying to your friend by omission. Think about it. That there are lies of commission where you speak an untruth, and there are also lies of omission where you neglect to say the truth. Both are lies and both are betrayal. And so you have to weigh the difference. Do I want to hold on to this or not? Because the cheating spouse has essentially forced you now to become an accomplice in the deception. How will your friend feel if somewhere down the road she finds out that you knew and you didn't say anything? So before we take our break, because it's that time again, I'm going to share 4 specific risks of keeping that big secret. And then after our 4th one, we'll take a break. So one is a loyalty conflict. That's one of the risks. Your brain faces a constant struggle because protecting your friend and keeping the secret is hard to do. A second one is anxiety spikes. Every interaction with either one of them, your friend or the spouse, every time you see them, whether you run into them in the neighborhood, maybe you're in the same, friend group, we get together to bowl, we get together for game night, maybe you see them at your place of worship or at the kids' schools, wherever it is, every interaction with either one of them becomes a very stressful exercise in self-censorship, because you have to work hard to not only control yourself in terms of not saying anything, but your facial expressions, your behavior, everything requires you to try to be as normal as possible in the situation. And if it's somebody that really knows you, a lot of times they know something is up. They don't know what it is, but you're not being yourself. So what's really going on? And that creates anxiety, because now you're walking in a lie. You are forcing yourself to have to behave a certain way around them. Number 3 is guilt by association. You might feel complicit in the spouse's behavior, which erodes your own peace of mind. You are guilty by association in some people's minds. And then the 4th one is, again, the hypervigilance. You make yourself exhausted trying to remember what you can and cannot say around your friend. You don't want to release anything. You don't want to let your friend know what you know, and you don't want to let the spouse know what you know. So you're always on guard, trying to keep things from messing up. I mean, it can really be a mess. I hope none of us ever get into a situation where we discover some deep, dark secret about a friend's spouse, because then we've got all of these decisions that I just spent 30 minutes going through that you have to make. So that's a lot, and it's kind of heavy. So we're going to take another break, go do whatever needs to be done, and be sure to come back for the wrap up, the last segment of the show. This is Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing on Pittsburgh's DSEN, and we'll be right back.
What's up, Pittsburgh and Pittsburgh's DSEN listeners? It's Monday. Let's start the week off right. We have that soulful music to help you. Yes, we have all the soulful sounds, and we hope that you're enjoying it. If so, send us a text at 412-218-3888 to let us know. We're wishing everyone a safe, productive, and fun week. And of course, keep our sounds on and let someone know about us. We are Pittsburgh's DSEN, the place for soul.
Don't tell me you're sorry, 'cause you're not. And baby, when I know you're only sorry you got caught. But you put on quite a show, really had me going. But now it's time to go. Curtains finally closing.
All right, welcome back to Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing on Pittsburgh's DSEN. If you've got a comment that you want to put in YouTube, if you're like, let's say you're viewing this after the live broadcast, you can still put your comments and your questions in that chat. I will get them and I can respond to you in the chat. So please, as you're listening, if there's something that you think you just got to get it off your chest, put it in there. Or if you have a question, put it out there. And in fact, I have a comment from Kevin, who says, I disagree that if you don't say anything on cheating, that you're lying. It's just simply none of your business. That's not lying. And again, that's a valid perspective. The way the experts in the field look at it is they look at the fact that there are lies of commission and lies of omission. And so when you know a truth and you don't tell that truth, they look at that as a lie of omission. Sometimes the best thing to do really is just keep your mouth closed, because I do agree that what's going on in that relationship is none of your business. But those are all things that you have to think about. And I really think you would have to be prepared. If your friend finds out that you knew and you said nothing, then how are you going to handle the friendship from that point moving forward? Case in point, well, it's a little bit different. So in a former neighborhood, one of my neighbors, we were very close, and our kids were the same ages. She had 2 boys, same age as my 2 boys. They played together, everything. Many years later, after 20 some odd years of marriage, she revealed that her husband came out, told her that he was gay, and that he had been having an affair with a man, and he was going to be leaving. So, of course, it was devastating for her. But where it's similar to what we're talking about is when she shared that with certain of her friends, they said that they knew he was gay. And so when she was talking to me about this, she was telling me how upset she was and how she cut them off because they knew. And in her mind, they should have said something to her so that she could look for the signs or whatever. And so that she would not be embarrassed and humiliated, that this would not have dragged out as long as it did. So I don't think that her friends were obligated to tell her because truth of the matter is I wondered myself, it's like I'm seeing some stuff and yeah, but I felt like not my business. Maybe she already knows and she's cool with it. Maybe she doesn't, but not my business. So I do agree that there are some things that are just not your business. Keep it to yourself. All right. So psychology experts, including some researchers at Columbia Business School, have identified several common ways that they say secrecy affects your well being. Now, again, whether you believe that it's a lie or not, they do say that keeping secrets, particularly of that magnitude, something that is so emotional with someone that is so close to you, that it can have some of these effects. It can create a cognitive distraction, meaning that the brain treats this secret as unfinished business. And so it's constantly occupying your thoughts and making it hard for you to concentrate. Then there's also an emotional toll. The emotional toll is the need to suppress information feeds into cycles of guilt and shame and loneliness. So you might experience guilt and shame and loneliness because of the emotions associated with suppressing the information. They talk about your physical health, that level of stress of keeping that hidden from someone that you care so much about can weaken your immune system. Imagine that. It can weaken your immune system. One of the ways that I know that happens is because one of the primary hormones in our body that's a stress hormone is cortisol. And many times we think about cortisol with respect to weight gain because all the commercials are selling products, how to reduce your cortisol level and talking about belly fat being associated with cortisol and all of that. While all of that is true, cortisol, when you have increases in cortisol and your stress is high, it can lead to a compromised immune system. It can lead to increased anxiety. It can lead to increased blood pressure, sleep disturbances, physical exhaustion. So again, as you're thinking about to tell or not to tell, if you're going through all of this as a result of holding on, you might make a decision to get it out. Now, maybe getting it out to your friend is not the way to go. Maybe you need to go to see a counselor or, talk to your spouse or something so that you let it out. And then the last thing is relationship friction. So these researchers at Columbia said that constantly monitoring what you say limit your natural communication, and it can prevent any real deep, authentic communication or deep, authentic connection because of the secrets that you're keeping. All right, so we've got a few things here on the line. So what happens if you think someone is cheating and the couple has an open marriage and you didn't know? That is a great question. Another reason not to get involved. You are so right. And while I didn't do the research specifically on that, so I don't have any numbers to share with you, there is somewhat of an uptick in open marriages these days. Or you can look at it from the standpoint that some people are in committed partnerships but not married, and they may view the rules of their relationship a little bit differently. So you never really know. And because of that, really just keep it to yourself. It's another reason not to get involved. I agree with you, Kevin. What if the partner has an STD? Oh, what a great question. Now, if the partner has an STD and they bring that back into the household, how do you explain stuff like that? If you are taking it upon yourself to cheat and not use some protection, you could be putting everybody at risk. Or in the case of one of the situations that I was involved in providing information for, there was a male who cheated. The woman got pregnant. And then she came back and told him about this 2-year-old child that was his. So he was then faced with the situation of having to tell the wife about it, and it was a big mess. They decided to stay. This is one where, again, the woman decided that she was going to stay in the marriage. They were going to go through counseling and reconciliation, and she made the stipulation that she would stay in the marriage, but he could have no contact with that child. He had to pretend as if the child did not exist. So he did send child support. She gave in on that. Take care of your child. So he did send child support. But I believe that in that situation, the wife was afraid of the constant reminder, if this kid is around, you're going to eventually want to perhaps bring her to the house or into functions or things like that, and other people will know. She was very embarrassed by the situation and didn't want anyone to know. And then also, I think there was a fear that something might rekindle. You might be going to visit your child or have a visitation or something, and some sparks fly between you and the mom. And so, yeah, for him, the only way that they could make it work was he had to agree to that if he wanted to save the marriage, which he did, because the other relationship for him was just a physical thing. It was not an emotional relationship. He did not want to be with that other woman. So, yeah, you could get found out because of the STD or because of a baby being created in the process. There's just so many ways that it can go left. And so there's a lot to consider. A lot to consider. Though in this day and age, really, do you want to be having unprotected sex? And we know that not the only thing that's 100% is abstinence, but still, if you're having unprotected sex, that's just not a smart thing to do, no matter what. Okay, so how do you navigate your next steps? And thanks to all of you who texted some questions and comments. To protect your own mental health and decide how to act, again, here's what they say. These are some filtering questions as you're trying to go through, do I or don't I? One would be, would telling confirm suspicions that your friend already has? So let's say your friend is already wrestling with this, struggling with it. I think this is going on. I don't know what to do. And now you have some evidence of it. You need to think about this person already has suspicion. So by sharing what you know, are you helping her make a decision that will perhaps lead to putting her out of her misery, or what? Is there some immediate harm? It's something else to think about as you navigate this. If the secret involves physical, financial, or severe emotional danger to your friend, then the psychological cost of silence is usually much higher than the fallout of speaking up. And then, is it better to drop hints or feel them out first? Sometimes people do that in situations. They drop little hints for you to pick up on, or they fill you out with hypothetical situations, or they tell you about something that happened to someone else that they know, and they want to know, what would you do in this situation? And would you want to know? And would you? So people sometimes do that. And again, that can be dangerous because as you're talking about it, that friend of yours might give you one response based on the fact that it's somebody else's life. But she might feel, or he might feel, totally different about it, knowing that it's going on unbeknownst to her in her own life. You have to think about whether or not they asked for the information. If the spouse forced you to keep a secret. So let's say you tell the spouse, hoping that they will do the right thing by ending the relationship. Even if they don't go and tell their spouse that they've been cheating, put an end to it. Don't do it again. Okay. So, if they are forcing you to be quiet, don't say anything. Maybe you're friends with both of them. And so the spouse may look at it like you're being disloyal to me if you go and reveal this secret to her. They have unfairly transferred their psychological burden onto your shoulders now. Because if you go along with that and you agree that you won't say anything, now you're obligated to protect a secret that somebody else is it's their wrongdoing, but they brought you into the fold. And you really need to think about, what is your primary goal? Remember, the right thing for the wrong reason can still be the wrong thing. So decide if your main focus is protecting your friendship, protecting your own peace of mind, avoiding drama, protecting a marriage, helping a friend. What is your goal? What is it that you want to do? Examine your motives, and that should help you understand what to do. As I was thinking about this, putting this all together, I thought about, would I want to know? You have to think about that. Would I want to know? So in every situation, be intentional. Be intentional about when and where and how you share the news. If you decide to move forward, are they experiencing anything that is very emotionally charged for them? Like, do they have an ill family member? Are they dealing with some financial hardships? Is she pregnant at this time, meaning the wife? Do they have issues with children? What else is going on? Because now you just are adding to the burden that this person is already bearing. So you have to think about that. And if you were to choose to move forward with this, think about a place that's private so that they have the freedom to express their emotions any way they see fit without being embarrassed by, people around. You don't know if they're going to break down and sob. You don't know if they're going to get angry and want to throw things. You don't know. But respect their privacy and tell them in a place that's private, like maybe in their own home or in your home or something. It's just something to think about. And be sensitive and thoughtful with your words. That's not something that you just want to blurt out. You have to be very careful and intentional about how you do it. So again, I'm not advocating. It is not my place to tell you whether you should confront them on the spot, confront them at a later time, tell your friend, or choose to mind your own business. I'm just trying to help you with pros and cons that go along with all of it. And so there are lots of things by profession that I have come in contact with and experienced, and some of it in my personal life as well. And so none of us is immune to some of these things. And so just think about it. Think about how it might impact you. And then think about it this way. What if it was not a friend, but a family member? What if it was your sister, maybe a brother or a cousin? Would your answer change? Maybe you wouldn't tell a friend, you just mind your business. But if you found out that your sister's husband was cheating on her, would you feel differently? Would you feel a need to tell your sister? Would you then not consider it minding your own business because this is my sister? Her business is my business. We're tight like that. How is it? What would you be thinking about? So again, what would you do? We still have time for people to call in with questions and comments. You can call me at 412-213-8995 or text 412-218-3888. If your answer is it depends, then okay, tell us what it depends on. Would it differ based on the closeness of the family member? Would it depend based on how long you've known the person? Would it depend on, maybe the gender of the person? Maybe your best friend is a male and you want to share with your male how his wife is acting. I mean, there are all kinds of things that might go into it. So if your answer is it depends, then, let us know and tell me what it depends on. Now, on the flip side, in the time that we have remaining, which actually is not a whole lot. So if we look at the flip side, what if your friend finds out that you knew? I raised this earlier. What if they find out that you knew and you didn't say anything? Remember, that was our fourth option, just remaining silent and minding your own business. Will they feel like you betrayed them by not saying something? I'm willing to bet that if it was a family member, if your sister knew that you knew and you didn't say anything, she would feel betrayed. She would feel like, out of loyalty to me, we are blood. This is something you should have shared. You might feel like, let me stay out of it. But that person wants to feel helped by you. They don't want to feel like they've been played a fool. They don't want the embarrassment and the shame. So they would want to put an end, whether an end is to the marriage or an end to the cheating or whatever the case might be. They would want to put an end to the situation. When a friend finds out that you kept their partner's infidelity a secret, they might feel like you betrayed them. And that can feel like a double blow to them, because not only were they betrayed by their spouse, but now they feel like they were betrayed by you as well. So even though your silence is well-intentioned, it often makes the other person feel isolated. Like, I have nobody, there's nobody on my side. I'm going through life alone. Sometimes people feel manipulated. It's like, you were close to me and I thought you were my friend, but this shows that you really weren't. Sometimes they feel blindsided by how they find out, and it might cause them to question their trust not only in their partner, but in you, because they may feel like if I couldn't count on you to give me this information, then what else can I trust you or not trust you with? So again, that doesn't mean that minding your own business is not still the thing to do if that's your choice. These are just some other things that you need to think about. And as I said, think about what you would want to know. Now, that doesn't mean that what you want is what they want, but at least put yourself through the thought process of what are some things that I'd be thinking about? What are some things that I might do? What are some options I might have? Would I want to know? And how would I want someone to tell me? You know, the when, the where, and the how, if they were going to tell me that kind of information, so that if you decide to move forward, you can at least move forward from more of an empathetic place because you put yourself through at least the mind exercise of what if I was in that situation, what would I want? I know the golden rule says treat other people as you want them to treat you, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But that's on a different level. That is not always a literal translation. That does not always mean, okay, well, I would want to know, so I'm going to tell them. Sometimes you have to do, you know, when in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we don't talk about the golden rule. We used to talk about the platinum rule, which is treat people the way they want to be treated, because sometimes the way somebody else wants to be treated is not the way you would want to be treated. And you have to think about that. Everybody is an individual. And if we're going to be equitable, then you have to treat people the way they want to be treated. It's not a one size fits all world, but it's still worth exploring what you would want in that situation. So when you're navigating this situation, you have to be empathetic. You know, I have to try to put myself in your shoes and feel what you feel and what would be the best thing. You have to think about accountability, because whether you tell or you don't tell, you are now accountable for the decision that you made. You don't know what the outcome is going to be. Your friend may never find out. It may have been a one-time thing and the spouse is done with it, but they might find out. So whatever decision you make, you have to hold yourself accountable. And there has to be clear communication, clear communication. So if you decide to tell, you have to validate their pain. Resist the urge to make excuses for why you didn't speak up. Acknowledge that your silence hurt them. This is in a case where they find out some other way. Regardless of what your rationale was, they might be hurt, and you have to allow them the time and space to feel that hurt. Validate their anger. Don't become defensive. That's where you have to be accountable for your behavior. You have to feel like, no, I did not tell you, and I felt I had good reason for not telling you, and you'd have to stand on that. But you would have to experience whatever hurt they experience and whatever comes as a result of that. You also need to, and again, this is what the experts are saying, you need to explain your motive honestly. So were you afraid? Were you afraid that maybe the spouse would do something to you if you told? Were you afraid that she might hurt herself, or she might hurt him, or she might go after the other woman? Were you afraid that it might end their marriage and you didn't want to be a part of that? Were you afraid? And if so, then share that you were afraid and what you were afraid of. Did you think it wasn't your place to intervene? If that's how you feel, that was none of my business, it was not my place to intervene, then stand on that and explain your motive honestly. I didn't tell you because it was not my place to tell you. If you were going to find out, you were going to have to find out through some other means on your own. And briefly explain your reasoning, but make it clear that you're not trying to, it's not like you're defending your actions. You're just being transparent. You're just letting them know this was the rationale, because if you didn't do anything wrong, you don't need to be defensive. So if I'm clear that not telling you was the right decision, I don't need to defend it. I can explain to you my rationale, but I don't need to defend it. I didn't do anything wrong. You need to listen more than you speak, because if they find out and they're feeling betrayed, there's a lot that they want to get out. So you have to give them the space to process their emotion. Don't turn it into a debate, a conversation, an argument. Don't try to defend or deflect. Let them get it out. Listen to their pain. Let them speak their truth. And they will likely be going through a complex mix of grief and anger and confusion and betrayal and denial and pain and guilt and shame. There's a lot that's going to be happening. So let them get it all out. And then the last one that I'll mention is expect boundaries. Things are going to shift, whether it's temporarily or for good. Things are going to shift. So, depending on the severity of the situation and your personality, their personality, the closeness of the relationship or lack thereof, there are going to be some boundaries put up. They might need some space. They might need some time away from everyone. It might not be personally about you. It might not be because you shared this with me. It's because of this new information that I've received. I need some space. And so you have to give them that space for however long. Maybe you will send a text every now and then, I'm here for you if you need me or whatever, but give them the space. And maybe they won't choose space. Maybe they'll choose to end the friendship with you entirely. You have to be ready for that as well. But again, if you feel you did the right thing, then you might just have to take one for the team. Hey, okay, the friendship is over, but I kept my mouth shut because I felt that was the thing to do. And even though the friendship ends, they might put an end to it for like 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever the case might be. But it might come back around at some point. Once a lot of the burden that they're feeling has lifted, or they've got a new perspective on things, something shifts. Maybe you haven't seen each other for a while, but then you come back together, you see each other again. You never know. The friendship may not be gone forever. And you have to respect their boundaries, as they process this new information, whatever it is that they say now has to be the boundaries around the relationship. You've got to be willing to respect that, respect their boundaries. So again, I'm not saying to tell or not to tell. I just think it's an interesting dilemma. The modern moral dilemma is very interesting. How do you handle it when you find out some secret? And so, we talked about it from the standpoint of cheating because for many, that is just like the ultimate betrayal. There may have been something else that you found out. Maybe you found out that they have a gambling addiction. Maybe you found out that they're using drugs. I mean, the situation might vary. I don't know if that would change your response. Maybe there's some things you would tell them about, other things you wouldn't. Maybe they're working a second secret job. I mean, who knows? They're funding whatever their habits are by this other income that they're bringing in. There are so many things that could be out there. But like I said, if you don't want this to become your own personal reality TV show, then the best thing to do, at least from my perspective, would be not to share. I don't know that I could say that if it was a family member, if it was a sister or a brother, I might have to say something because that bond, yeah, you might get mad at me or whatever, but that bond, that blood bond is going to remain. And even though you might get mad, you might pull away. If I'm looking out for you and your best interest, I still love you. I know you still love me. This is just something that we have to deal with for this point in time. So I think if it were, I don't know. I really don't know. It's a tough one, but I do think that I would be more inclined to tell a brother or a sister than I would be to tell a friend. And you also have to think about it from the standpoint of what if they suspect something and they ask you, now what do you do? Do you share it or do you come out and lie? Do you deflect and say, you know what? I would just rather you figure that out on your end. Y'all keep that between the two of you. That deflection might clue them. There's just so many directions that this can go in. So let me share with you again, like I did at the end of the first hour, some objections that are pretty common in this area and the way the experts say you can respond. So one objection is for someone that says it's none of your business, stay out of other couples' marriages. The counter that the professionals say is, I hear you, but the moment a cheating spouse displays that behavior in front of me or forces me to hold their secret, they made it my business. By staying silent, I am actively choosing to protect a liar over an innocent friend. True friendship doesn't stand by and watch someone get gaslighted. I don't know that I agree with all of that, but that's one counter argument that some professionals have given. And objection number 2. So if they explicitly told you they don't want to know, you must respect that boundary. That might be something that someone says. If they're answering the question of to tell or not to tell, their response could be, if they explicitly told you they don't want to know, then you must respect that boundary. So the way that the some professionals, it's not everybody, but this is the way that a particular professional online, in the article that I was reading, this is how they countered with that. People say they don't want to know when life is good, and it's a hypothetical concept. But when they are exposing themselves to potential health risks, like the question we had about what if you get an STD, or if they're exposing themselves to public humiliation or financial ruin because this person is cheating and is taking money that should be spent in the household and spending it on dinners and trips and gifts or whatever the case might be. If any of those things is happening because of a cheating partner, that hypothetical boundary changes. And sometimes being a real friend means saving someone from a fire, even if they told you they liked the warmth. So again, just more to ponder over. That's what some of the experts are saying. So now here's something that I know you were thinking about, but too politically correct to ask. So I'm going to ask it for you. I'm going to make this statement and see how you handle it. Men and women would handle the situation differently. Does that sound like a correct statement to you? Do you think men and women, based on gender, would handle the situation differently? Research suggests that women are more likely than men to tell the friend if their spouse was cheating, not because women gossip more, not because women can't keep a secret, but because the difference is largely one of communication styles. Female friendships are different. Females tend to prioritize deep emotional sharing and are often more centered on providing direct, immediate support in times of relationship distress. So just because we handle emotions differently, we are more likely to tell than men. So in general, women share deep emotions with each other more than men do. And that's just another expression of it. When men get together, how often do they talk about relationship issues? How often do they lend emotional support to some brother who's in distress? So there are some differences. But again, think about the strength of the bond, the fear of backlash, and available proof. Is this just something you think, or is this something you know? All of those things are factors. Now, if you reveal the big secret, how will you feel? Are you going to feel guilt, anxiety, or relief? What's going to be the end result for you? Not an easy question to answer. You might think so, you might feel that way, but again, when the rubber meets the road, what would you do? That's our show for tonight. Thank you for hanging out with me. Before I leave you, let me give you a few reminders. Check out Soul Take, Pittsburgh's exciting sports talk show each Tuesday from 6 to 8 p.m. Tomorrow's topics are, can the Pirates make a playoff run after the All-Star break? Everything you need to know about the Pirates selections and the MLB draft and trades made. How the Steelers defensive line rank heading into training camp in 2 weeks. And the latest on the Penguins offseason. WNBA and how New York's, I don't know how to say that. Lainey Hamilton is the last name, but Nija Lainey Hamilton, I guess I don't know that player, was ejected for tossing a shoe and hitting Toronto's Marina Mabrey. All of these things are going to be discussed. It's all open for discussion. NBA free agency and the latest on where LeBron James could possibly play. I know we talked about that. I listened to Soul Take last week, and I heard the brothers talking about things with LeBron and where he might go. So they're also going to share some favorites, sleepers and more for the Open Championship in men's golf. And after my show tonight, right now, right here, tune into our radio stream at pghdsen.com. That's our website. Tune in to the website pghdsen.com, and you will get some the best of soulful music that will be on until midnight. Remember, the best way to stay up to date with Pittsburgh's DSEN is to subscribe. It's free, so why not? We'll keep you updated on all of our 24/7 programming like soulful music, Pittsburgh sports talk, and lifestyle programming like travel tips and this show right here. So all of that is available to you on Pittsburgh's DSEN, the place for soul. As always, when I leave you, I remind you to keep learning, keep growing, keep loving. One love.
You've been listening to Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing. Continue to listen to Pittsburgh's DSEN. We're on 24/7. See our radio schedule for programming details, and please remember to subscribe to receive updated information.